Common myths and misconceptions in private investigations. Television shows like CSI, Law & Order, Chicago PD, and Magnum PI have shaped the thoughts of many on what private investigators can do. In this video, I'm going to share 10 common myths and the reality of how things really work in the real world of private investigations. Hi, I'm Tim Santoni. I've been a licensed private investigator for over 20 years. I've worked and supervised thousands of cases. I'm an expert witness, and my clients include law firms in the AmLaw 100, Fortune 500 businesses, and some of the biggest insurance companies around. Let's get started. Myth number 1. Surveillance is exciting, exhilarating work that involves following and videotaping subjects all day using cool zoom cameras and undercover cameras. Reality. A typical day usually involves sweating it out in your car with your engine off to avoid detection. Waiting, and more waiting, hoping that your subject comes out. If the subject does get active, you have to be skilled enough to tail them without detection while still maintaining visual contact so you don't lose them. Myth number 2. Private investigators typically handle family law and infidelity investigations. In reality, some private investigators handle these types of cases, but most private investigators do work for law firms, businesses, insurance companies. Myth number 3. Private investigators have access to magical and comprehensive databases that allow them to locate individuals with one click from the comfort of their own desk. Reality, finding people is very difficult in today's day and age, especially when you're looking for someone that doesn't own a home. If a subject owns a home, then there is a high likelihood that there are multiple records and searches that tie them to a good address. Landline phones are a thing of the past. We as investigators often develop cell phone numbers, but those are much harder to use to verify an address because they are often associated with an address that the subject used when they set up the phone, which could be very old. Also, a discrete call to a cell phone is often not answered, and if it is, it's much more difficult to get the subject to provide a current address. One might think that because the private investigators have access to more data sources these days like social media, vehicle sightings, and other open source intelligence tools, that this would be helpful. In fact, that's not the case. There is much more data to review and analyze because much of it is not verified and much of it's outdated. Myth number 4. Private investigators have a database like law enforcement that allows them to search comprehensive background information, including searches of civil and criminal records in the state and federal courts nationwide. The reality is that the magical database doesn't exist for private investigators. In fact, an investigator must search every county where the subject may have lived or worked, or search through proprietary databases for archived records, or via the county courthouse directly when possible. In some cases, calls to the court are required because they don't offer online access. In many jurisdictions, it is necessary to send a researcher out to the courthouse to search on site or check with the clerk directly. When it comes to federal cases, both civil and criminal cases can be searched through PACER, but the identifiers like social security number, date of birth, and addresses have been obviously removed, which makes it challenging to determine if your subject is truly the person involved in a case. Despite what many people think, there is no such thing as a nationwide criminal or litigation search. Myth number 5. If you have a license plate number and a state of registration, you can get the registered owner's name and address. In reality, most states, including California where I operate from, the DMV will only provide the name of the registered owners and the lead holders of a vehicle. They won't offer up an address. Myth number 6. Private investigators can get DMV photos of a subject by running their driver's license. In reality, this is just not the case. DMV photos are not accessible in most states. As private investigators, we can get a description including height, weight, eye color, and hair color only. Myth number 7. A private investigator doesn't have to disclose who they are or who they are working for when speaking with witnesses. This is not a recommended practice. A private investigator has a legal and ethical obligation to disclose who they are and who they are working with, because failure to do so could get their work product and evidence thrown out in litigation. Myth number 8. The gathering of crucial documents, information, and video footage like we see on TV and movies can be done in minutes or hours, in many cases by flashing a badge or intimidating a witness. In the real world of private investigations, we don't always have an active case that allows us to subpoena records. In many cases, our clients don't want the other side to know what they're looking for, so subpoenas aren't a good option. Even if a subpoena is issued, it can take weeks or months to get back some records. Also, a private investigator should not flash a badge or intimidate a witness to get what they need. This leads us to myth number 9. Myth number 9 is a private investigator with a valid license can flash their license to gain the cooperation or exert authority when dealing with a witness and parties they encounter during an investigation. According to the California State PI licensing rules, a private investigator is not supposed to flash a badge as it is deemed potentially confusing and can give the impression that they are connected to a state or federal agency. And the last myth, myth number 10, all private investigators are former cops or have prior experience working in law enforcement. This is just not the case. Many people in law enforcement transition to the private investigation world once they retire. However, many investigators have no law enforcement background. In states like New York, in order to obtain a PI license, prior law enforcement background is required, but many other states do not have this requirement. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please, I encourage you to check out A Day in the Life of a Private Investigator over here, and I encourage you to like and subscribe and share this with someone in your network. Thanks.